Before you get started keying, it's important to have the proper tools around. Of course, you need a sample of the plant that you're going to be keying, complete with flowers and leaves if you can, and any information about whether it's woody or how it's rooted. All of those factors can play into what the key is going to ask you for. It can also be helpful to go ahead and dissect some of the flowers to determine the placement of the male and female parts of the flower, the petals, and the sepals. To help with that, it's good to have a razor blade handy. I often keep one of these in the back of my book so that I have it at hand no matter where I am, in a little envelope that I can fold into the back pages. You'll also need some dissection tools. Tweezers can be great, but just something to simply probe apart the flowers will be really helpful if you don't have a full dissection kit. In absence of any particular item in a dissection kit, just an unfolded paperclip can be extremely handy in going through and pulling apart parts of the flower under a magnifying lens to see individual components. Which brings us to the final thing that's really important to include, a hand loop. You should have either a 10x or a 20x hand loop. Sometimes you can get by with just a 5x hand loop, but regardless, you'll need some magnification so that you can get in and really see the details of the flower. Today we're going to key to family, one of the more common woody tree deciduous flowering species that we have, especially on our streets. This is a family that's very common in street and fruit trees, and we're going to use our Flora of the Pacific Northwest to key this to family. And this is a really nice early key, family key subject. So, to begin with, let's dig in to our Flora of the Pacific Northwest. Bear with me while I flip the pages. Past our introduction into our formal flora here. And like we have done before, we will start with our artificial key to families of the region. So, first, we key out plants aquatic, plants terrestrial, clearly terrestrial. Plants not producing seeds, reproducing instead by means of tiny one-celled spores, or plants generally producing seeds, either in cones or in flowers. We clearly have flowers. Ovules enclosed in the ovary of a flower. The flower is showy to occasionally much reduced. The ripened ovaries dry or fleshy. Plants herbaceous, woody, with various kinds of leaves, often having a branch vein system. Angiosperms are flowering plants. Yes, we like that. Inflorescence with the flowers all replaced by bulb-like or corm-like vegetative propagules. Plants herbaceous. No, we don't like that. I already told you that we're pulling this off of a tree. This is a woody plant. You can see some of the branch there. So we get to go with the second one. For B, flowers all or in part normal, not at all modified into vegetative propagules. Plants herbaceous to woody. 5A, plants branch parasites. Without roots in the soil, their stems attached above ground directly to the stems of other herbaceous or woody plants by means of haustoria penetrating the stem of the host. Leaves scale-like or simple or entire. This is like our mistletoes, and that's not what we're looking at. We're going to go with plants not branch parasites, though occasionally epiphytic or vining, with roots anchored to bark, more often rooted in the ground, or aquatic, occasionally parasitic, by means of underground root haustoria. Leaves diverse. You'll recall that our next couplet separates out the Cactaceae. Stems greatly enlarged with fleshy pulp, either flattened and jointed or globose and cylindric. That's not us. Stems not at once enlarged, fleshy or spinose. Leaves often well developed. Perianth parts often not numerous. That's going to be important for the family we're looking at in a second. Note the use of often there. So they can be numerous, they're just not always numerous. 8a. Perianth parts generally in sets of 4 or 5, rarely 3 or occasionally numerous, and showy or occasionally much reduced or absent. Leaves mostly pinnately or palmately veined, the smaller veins generally forming reticulate polygonal networks of veination. The veination is often obscure in narrow leaves. The blades simple to variously lobed, dissected, or compound. Embryo generally with 2 cotyledons. Vascular bundles of herbaceous stems generally in a ring enclosed in a pith. If you remember your basic botany, this is basically describing all of our dicots. 2 cotyledons, dicots. We could go read 8b. 8b is going to describe our monocots. (8b) Perianth parts generally in sets of 3 in a few different families, often reduced to 1 to numerous scale-like or bristle-like bracts, or occasionally absent, never 5, never at once numerous and showy. We can actually stop right there. We know that's describing our monocots. Let's take a look at our actual plant here. And let's see what we're talking about when we're talking about perianth parts. So here you can clearly see that on each flower, well, this one lost one, this one lost one, this one's still intact. You can see 5 petals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can also see in the background 5 sepals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I count through my stamens, I see that I have numerous stamens. And the next question that's going to come out is, how many pistils do I have? Okay, so we're going to dig into that in a second. But at least we know at the very beginning here, we are dealing with a flower that has perianth parts, the corolla and the calyx, that are 5 mirrous. And you'll see a telltale sign of a plant being polypetalous. Polypet or polypetalous is the petals falling off. Even when you're dissecting it, they're just falling off one at a time. We'll push that to the side for a minute. 9a and 9b. 9a, stems woody or at least persistent and generally perennial above ground. Plants mostly trees, shrubs, or woody vines, including many mat-forming woody species and several with greenish but persistent vein-like stems, but excluding most herbaceous plants, with only small persistent woody base. Or stems herbaceous, including all annuals, perennials, perennial vines that generally die back to the crown, or no more than a small persistent base. Clearly, we're going with stems woody, group 5. So now we can flip to group 5 on our book. And in my new Flora of the Pacific Northwest, as of 2019, that group 5 shows up on page 11. It might be a little different on the older artificial keys on older versions of Flora of the Pacific Northwest. Group 5, woody dicots, typically with 4 to 5 myrrhous flowers and with net-leaved veins. I think it's important, if you're new to this, to go ahead and put a bookmark here so that you can readily flip to the woody dicots group. And that way in the future, you can just start straight at group 5 and you won't have to go through the rest of the key to get here. You don't have to decide whether it's a cactus or an aquatic plant. You already know those things. Okay, when we pick up again, we'll pick up at group 5 and move forward.